It is Conrad Fisher welcoming you to your educational destiny. I'm the Chairman of Medicine for Kaplan Medical, and I'm the Associate Chief of Medicine for Education at SUNY Downstate School of Medicine. We have the newest, the best, the most beautiful educational materials you have ever seen anywhere on the planet. The medical schools have lost the initiative in medical education. They are no longer at the edge. We are. Come with us, and we're going to give you all the answers. Introduction to antibiotics. Welcome to infectious diseases. Isn't it nice to feel current? Well, the first thing is, what are the antibiotics to treat staphylococcal and streptococcal infections? Introduction to antibiotics. Well, let's look over here. Introduction to antibiotics says this. The most common organism causing osteomyelitis in 1891 was Staph aureus. The most common organism to cause osteomyelitis in 1941 was Staph aureus. And the most common infection to cause osteomyelitis in the year 2007 is Staph aureus. So that means the organisms that cause disease don't change, but the antibiotics that go with those infections do change. Organisms don't change, but the antibiotics do. Got a lot of updates, a lot of new things since last time this tape was done, and we are going to be also au courant, very current today, I think so. So that means when we're talking about staphylococcal and streptococcal infections, we're talking about Staph aureus or Staph epidermidis. The answer is Staph aureus. Staph epidermidis. Staphylococcal epidermidis is only a problem in some things that go through the skin. I have catheter sepsis going through my skin. Puts the bacteria, and you don't know the shape I've been in. I've got a prosthetic joint. A prosthetic what? A prosthetic joint, a prosthetic valve. Both of these do the same thing. Prosthetic joint, prosthetic valve. You could have staphylococcal epidermidis infections. Remember, Staph epidermidis lives on your skin. It doesn't go inside unless you force it there with a knife or a needle. So that means Staph epidermidis is the infection with catheter infections, with people who are on dialysis, because you have to go through the skin to do dialysis, and through the skin to put in a catheter, and through the skin to put in a prosthetic joint, and go through the skin to put in a prosthetic valve. That means Staph epidermidis does not cause infections unless you have broken the integrity of the skin. Neurosurgical, Staph epi in your CSF. Neurosurgical, staphylococcal epidermidis in your CSF. When we're talking about staph and strep, we mean Staph aureus, osteomyelitis, Staph aureus, regular endocarditis, Staph aureus, skin infections, Staph aureus, bone infections, Staph aureus, septic arthritis, Staph aureus for bone and heart and skin and joint, bone and heart and skin and joint, and bone and heart and skin and joint. Staph aureus. Now, which streptococcus are we talking about for infections? Mostly we mean strep pyogenes. Strep pyogenes. Strep pneumonia is in the lung. Strep viridans is in the heart. Strep pneumonia is in the lung. Strep viridans is in the heart. Strep pneumonia is a respiratory pathogen. Strep pneumonia is a respiratory pathogen. Bronchitis and pneumonia. Viridans group strep is only in the heart. We got a 62-year-old little old lady who has had a fever. She has no murmur, and because of this fever she gets some blood cultures, and the blood cultures grow viridans group strep. And the question is, what would you do next after starting antibiotics? You start antibiotics, what would you do next? And the answer is, what would you do next? Viridans in the blood? Viridans in the blood, what would you do? You would get an echocardiogram. Why, you would get an echocardiogram. You would get an echocardiogram. Because what else does viridans group strep cause except endocarditis? What else does viridans group streptococcus cause except endocarditis? What else does viridans group strep cause except endocarditis? And the answer is nothing. What else does it cause except endocarditis? Nothing, nothing, nothing. The only significant disease it causes is endocarditis. Let's look at our enemy here. Look at this. These are the guys, streptococci. Look at that. Okay, look at this. Streptococci, gram-positive cocci in pairs. Gram-positive cocci in pairs. Gram-positive cocci in pair. Gram-positive cocci in pair. Gram-positive cocci in pair. Gram-positive coccus in a pair. E. coli, gram-negative bacteria, longer and pinker, longer and pinker. Gram-negative bacteria, longer and pinker, long and pink, long and pink. Anaerobes, could be any of them, could be. This is C. difficile, this is a gram-positive rod. It's a gram-positive rod. So what we have here is we have anaerobes, gram-negative bacilli, and streptococcus. So staph and strep means bone and heart and skin and joint, bone and heart and skin and joint. And when we have an infection with staph and strep, what antibiotics is the best initial antibiotic to use for staphylococcal and streptococcal infections? What is the best initial antibiotic to use? And the answer is oxacillin, cloxacillin, dicloxacillin, and ampicillin. Oxacillin and cloxacillin, cloxacillin and ampicillin. Oxacillin and cloxacillin, dicloxacillin, and ampicillin. Ox, clox, dicloxacillin, amp. Ox, clox, dicloxacillin, amp. Same as it ever was, same as it ever was. What about methicillin? When are you going to use methicillin? When are you going to use methicillin? Methicillin. Methicillin. What would you use for methicillin-sensitive Staph aureus? Oxacillin. What would you use for methicillin-sensitive Staph aureus? Oxacillin. What would you use for methicillin-sensitive Staph aureus? Oxacillin. Well, why do we talk about methicillin-sensitive and methicillin-resistant? When do you use methicillin? Never. Then why do we call it methicillin sensitive if you're not going to use methicillin? I don't know. You made a joke. That's because methicillin was the original name of the group. The original name of the group, okay? Okay, but we don't actually use methicillin. When we mean methicillin sensitive and methicillin resistant, we mean sensitive and resistant to ox, clox, dicloxacillin, NAF, ox, clox, dicloxacillin, NAF. Oh, why don't we like to use methicillin? Because I don't like to urinate eosinophils. I'm willing to do almost anything, but not pee eosinophils. Eosinophils, allergic interstitial nephritis. We don't use methicillin because it causes renal failure. It makes you pee eosinophils. Now, what if you have a little rash to penicillin? A little rash to penicillin? The penicillin is giving me a little rash. Oh, what would you do? I would give you penicillin, but it's very rash of you. So what would we use if we had a little rash to penicillin? And the answer is, if we have a little rash to penicillin, we can use first-generation cephalosporins. Cefazolin, some of you may know that as Kefzol, Anflex, Ancef, Kefzol, Ancef. You can use cefadroxil, another first-generation cephalosporin, or you can use cephalexin, another first-generation cephalosporins. Now, this is a big deal for some of you. You ready? If you have a rash to penicillin, you can use a cephalosporin without a problem. I know that some of you were told that there is a 10% cross-reactivity between penicillins and sulfa drugs, penicillins and cephalosporins. Well, all I can tell you is that there is no Santa Claus. There is no Easter Bunny. There is a tooth fairy, but it's your mother. And the amount of cross-reaction between penicillins and cephalosporins is considerably under 10%. But I was told, I know you've been lied to by the others, but I'll never lie to you. Which means, if you have a rash to penicillin, give the cephalosporin. You got it? You got it? That's just the way it is. I don't care who told you this. It's true. You can. Now, if you have a more severe allergic reaction, let's say that the allergic reaction is anaphylaxis. Let's say that the allergic reaction is anaphylaxis. If the allergic reaction is anaphylaxis, then we're not going to use a beta-lactam antibiotic. And here are the beta-lactam antibiotics. Here is penicillins, Here is cephalosporins. Here is penicillins. Here is cephalosporins. Here is another beta-lactam antibiotic called a carbapenem. Here's another beta-lactam antibiotic called the carbapenem. There are 4 beta-lactam antibiotics with that little square ring. Penicillins, cephalosporins, carbapenems, and monobactams. And of the monobactams, a beta-lactam ring alone, the only one that we have that we use is aztreonam. So there are 4 beta-lactam antibiotics. The amount of cross-reaction between penicillins and cephalosporins is considerably under 10%, way under that. The amount of cross-reactivity between penicillins and carbapenems is well under 1%. And the amount of cross-reaction between penicillins and monobactams is 0%. So therefore, the amount of cross-reaction is so small between this that basically we would use aztreonam, except aztreonam in the monobactam is only for gram-negative rods, not for staph and strep. If you have anaphylaxis to penicillins, we want to get out of the beta-lactam class altogether. How do we get out of the beta-lactam class altogether? And that is, if it's a mild infection, we can use a macrolide. Erythromycin, azithromycin, clarithromycin, erythromycin, azithromycin, clarithromycin, macrolides, azithroclarithromycin. You can use macrolides or the drug that's close to a macrolide but covers anaerobes. It's like a macrolide. It doesn't cover, but it also covers anaerobes. It's like a macrolide. It doesn't cover Mycoplasma and Legionella, but it does cover anaerobes. It's like a macrolide, but it doesn't cover Mycoplasma and Legionella, but it does cover anaerobes. That is staph, strep, and anaerobes, staph, strep, and anaerobes, staph, strep, and anaerobes. Clindamycin. Clindamycin. Staph, strep, and anaerobes. Above the diaphragm aspiration, clindamycin. Oral anaerobes, clindamycin. Going to your dentist to get your teeth pulled for endocarditis and you're allergic to penicillin, clindamycin, clindamycin. Oh, how you keep my mouth so clean. You prevent those anaerobe infections, which you know are really mean. Anaerobes, staph, strep, and anaerobes. Staph, strep, and anaerobes. Okay, now, you ready? What about that other evil organism? Not just if there's anaphylaxis, but what about that other evil organism? Oh, it's fun to play at the MRSA. MRSA. So therefore, MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. And remember, when we say methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, we mean really oxacillin-resistant Staph aureus. So I know. Listen, I don't make the news, I just report it. What do you do in a driveway? You park. What do you do in a parkway? You drive. When you get up early in the morning and you look up at the sky, what do you see? What's that called when that thing moves? Sunrise? You seen a sunrise? No, the sun, there is no such thing as sunrise. The earth turns. There's no sunrise. So what do you use for methicillin-resistant Staph aureus? Not methicillin. It's a joke. There's no sunrise or sunset. There's no parkway and driveway. Drugs for methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. Vancomycin. Vancomycin. Okay? Vancomycin. What do you use for methicillin-resistant Staph aureus? What do you use for methicillin-resistant Staph aureus? Vancomycin or dalinezolid. Vancomycin or linezolid. Vancomycin or linezolid. Vancomycin or linezolid or the other drug. Whoop, whoop, whoop. New drug coming in, but don't act like you never heard of it. It's 3 or 4 years old. It's not like it came out yesterday. It's not like it came out at lunchtime today. Vancomycin, linezolid, another drug for methicillin-resistant Staph aureus is daptomycin. Hey. Just because you never heard of it doesn't make it wrong. It can't be. Why not? I never heard of it. It can't exist. Why not? Oh, I never heard of it. Daptomycin. Oh, I got another one for MRSA, brand new, 2.5 years. Oh, another one, another one, another one, another drug for the MRSA. MRSA. It is, give me a T. Give me a I. Can you see this, cameraman? Can you see that down there? Give me a G. It's, I know what you want to say. You want to say Tigger. It's like Tigger, but it's not Tigger. And I love Tigger, because the wonderful thing about Tiggers, and Tiggers are wonderful things. The tops are made out of rubber. The bottoms are made out of springs. They're bouncy, flouncy, bouncy, flouncy, fun, 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 fun. And the most wonderful thing about Tiggers are, I'm the only one. But tigacycline. Not Tigger, but tigacycline. Don't you look at me in that tone of voice. I see you out there looking at me saying, what's that? I never heard of that. It's called education, sweetheart. Let's get one, okay? It's a brand new drug. Brand new means 2 to 3 years. I wouldn't be telling you if it wasn't at least 2 years old, okay? This covers gram negatives and anaerobes and MRSA. All right, we're feeling good, feeling fine. Getting answers right all the time. Okay, now let's go to the next set of drugs. The next set of drugs is, what are we going to do about gram-negative rods? Gram-negative rods, gram-negative bacilli. Well, let's go back here and look at this slide. Go to the next one. Oh, you see this? Gram-negative bacilli. Now this one is an E. coli here. Okay, gram-negative means it's pinky. Gram-negatives means it's pink. Gram-negatives means it's pink. However, this could be E. coli. It also could have been Klebsiella. It could have been Proteus. It could have been Enterobacter. It could have been Morganella. It could have been Pseudomonas. It could have been Serratia. E. coli, Klebsiella, Morganella, Pseudomonas, Serratia. Gram-negative bacteria. E. coli, Klebsiella, Enterobacter, Morganella, Pseudomonas, and Serratia. E. coli, Klebsiella, Proteus, Morganella, Pseudomonas, Serratia, Citrobacter, Enterobacter, Morganella, Pseudomonas, Serratia, Pseudomonas. E. coli, Klebsiella, Proteus, Enterobacter, Morganella, Citrobacter. Enterobacter, Pseudomonas, Serratia. Gram-negative rods. Aerobic in your poo-poo. Aerobic gram-negative rods. I have pyelonephritis. I've got a perforation in peritonitis. I have ascending cholangitis. I have a cholecystitis, gram-negative rods. Pyelonephritis, gram-negative rods. Ascending cholangitis, gram-negative rods. Peritonitis, gram-negative rods. Now these drugs I'm not giving you in the order in which to use them. The reason is that aminoglycosides cover 80 to 90% of E. coli. Carbapenems cover 80 to 90% of E. coli. Carbapenems, imipenem, meropenem, meropenem, imipenem, imipenem, meropenem, meropenem, imipenem. Oh yes, but then again, so does aztreonam cover 80 to 90% of gram-negative rods. But then again, so do carbapenems, so do aminoglycosides, so do fluoroquinolones, ciprofloxacin, ofloxacin, norfloxacin, levofloxacin, gadifloxacin, moxifloxacin, sparfloxacin, grepafloxacin. Ciprofloxacin, fluoroquinolone, 80-90% of gram-negative rods. Ciprofloxacin, ofloxacin, norfloxacin, lomafloxacin, levofloxacin, gadifloxacin, moxifloxacin, sparfloxacin, grepafloxacin. Floxacin, fluoroquinolones, 80 to 90% of gram-negatives. 80 to 90% of gram-negatives. Carbapenems is imipenem, meropenem, meropenem, imipenem. They all cover 80 to 90%. You could use any one of these for gram-negative rods. You could use any one of these for gram-negative rods. You could also use 3rd and 4th generation cephalosporins like ceftazidime or cefepime, ceftazidime or cefepime. And finally, you could use drugs that are the anti-pseudomonal penicillins. Piperacillin, ticarcillin, azlocillin, meslocillin. Introduction to Antibiotics says this: let's divide up all infections that there are into different groups of infections. We have the gram-negative rod infections. We have the staph and strep infections. We're going to do the anaerobic infections. I am not telling you to use one of these drugs over another. For instance, someone has pyelonephritis. You could say ampicillin and gentamicin, an aminoglycoside. You could say a fluoroquinolone. You could say aztreonam. They'll all cover pyelonephritis. Third and fourth generation cephalosporins, anti-pseudomonal penicillins. Every single one of these drugs will cover 80 to 90% of E. coli, Klebsiella, Enterobacter, Citrobacter, Morganella, Pseudomonas, and Serratia. Each one of them. Anaerobes, 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 anaerobic infections, anaerobic infections. If you have above the diaphragm anaerobes, it is clindamycin. If you have respiratory or above the diaphragm anaerobes, it is clindamycin. If you have respiratory or above the diaphragm anaerobes, it is clindamycin. If you have respiratory and above the diaphragm anaerobes. If you have GI anaerobes, it is metronidazole. If you have abdominal anaerobes, it is metronidazole. If you have gut anaerobes, anaerobic gram-negative rods, it is metronidazole. Anaerobes, clindamycin for respiratory anaerobes, metronidazole for GI anaerobes. Now the other anaerobic drugs that are good, it happens to be that carbapenems are also good for anaerobes. So let me make a little point about our introduction to antibiotics, okay? The way that I divide these things up for you is not microbiologically the truth. It's how you use these drugs. A microbiologist could walk in here and say, hey man, carbapenems cover strep viridans. They can be used to cover viridans endocarditis. That's true, but if you have viridans group endocarditis and you say imipenem, you fail. Hey man, meropenem covers Staph aureus. That's true. But if you have a person with cellulitis and you say meropenem, you fail. So how I have these antibiotics divided up is not microbiologically the truth. It's how they are to be used and how they're to be answered on your test. Metronidazole, carbapenems, excellent anaerobic coverage. The only two cephalosporins with anaerobic coverage are cefoxitin and cefotitan. Cefoxitin and cefotitan. Cefoxitin and cefotitan. Cefoxitin and cefotitan are the only two anaerobic drugs in the cephalosporins. Now let's look at some oddball things, okay? Let's look at some oddball things. When is doxycycline going to be your answer? And the answer is chlamydia infections, rickettsia infections, chlamydia infections, rickettsia infections, early Lyme disease, like Lyme that just has a rash, a joint, or a facial palsy, a rash, a joint, or a facial palsy, chlamydia, rickettsia, Lyme. When are we going to say Bactrim, trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole? Trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole has very few specific indications. Now it's true that trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole, Bactrim, can be used for bronchitis. However, that's not the main place it's used, and it's not how it's worked. It may be approved for that, but it's not how we're going to use the drug. Where is it definitely always useful? Pneumocystis pneumonia, and for uncomplicated cystitis. Pneumocystis pneumonia and uncomplicated cystitis. Trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole. Let's divide up every antibiotic known to man and see how they are used. When is tetracycline the answer? And the answer is never. Tetracycline. Everywhere in your brain you might have tetracycline, you put in the word doxycycline. Tetracycline, not used. Doxycycline does the same thing, but only twice a day. When is griseofulvin the answer? Never. Griseofulvin, dead for years. Dead for years. Now, our last subject here is going to be the subject of beta-lactam, beta-lactamase inhibitor medications. Beta-lactam and beta-lactamase inhibitor medications. The problem with ampicillin is that ampicillin, although it may cover strep, like all penicillins, although it may cover anaerobes, like all penicillins generally, except the oxalox group, It doesn't cover any staphylococcus. So what we do to ampicillin to make it cover staphylococcus is that we add sulbactam. And when you add sulbactam to the ampicillin, it adds staphylococcal coverage. It adds staphylococcal coverage and expands the gram-negative coverage. It adds staphylococcal coverage and expands the gram-negative coverage. It adds staphylococcal coverage and expands the gram-negative coverage. It adds staphylococcal coverage and expands the gram-negative coverage. That's known as unison. Now you'll notice that I don't use a lot of manufacturers' names here. There's for two reasons. Number one, I'm not an advertisement for drug companies. Number two is you can't rely on trade names to be on the test, but you can always rely on generic names to be there. The second thing is this. You notice I never do doses. I don't do doses on antibiotics. First of all, if we had to, we'd commit suicide. The second thing is it's not tested. Now, the problem with amoxicillin is that amoxicillin does not cover staphylococcus. The problem with amoxicillin is it does not cover staphylococcus. So we add to our amoxicillin clavulanic acid. And when we add the clavulanic acid, it adds staphylococcal coverage and expands the gram-negative coverage. Amoxicillin and clavulanic acid is known as augmentin. Ready? Lo, in the beginning the world was without form and void. And in 1941, we have penicillin released for civilian use within what is still one lifetime. Still one lifetime, from beginning to end anyway. By 1942, we have the first description of beta-lactamase. Wow. You're saying that within 1 year we developed beta-lactamase, the ability to destroy beta-lactam antibiotics? No, I'm actually saying the beta-lactamase has always been in there, but it was now selected out for by the antibiotics. You see, beta-lactamase has always been here. If you go into Egyptian mummies from 3,500 years ago, and you unwrap a freshly wrapped Egyptian mummy, if you find staphylococcus that was buried 3,500 years ago, you'll find beta-lactamase inside it. See, beta-lactamase has always been in here. Before there were antibiotics, there was beta-lactamase. It just selects out for it. Well, the problem is now, is that all the penicillins who now became resistant, the Staph aureus became resistant to penicillins. So even though on the penicillin nucleus, we add an amino group, and when you have aminopenicillin, 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 beta-ampicillin, and then amino-oxypenicillin, amino-oxpenicillin, 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 amoxicillin, amino and an oxin. You're resistant to all forms of staphylococcus. This is all resistant. Well, now let's see. We have piperacillin, and piperacillin has very good gram-negative coverage. Piperacillin is a gram-negative drug. Piperacillin is an anaerobic drug. Piperacillin is a streptococcal drug. Piperacillin is an anaerobic drug. Piperacillin is a strep drug. Piperacillin is a gram-negative drug. Piperacillin covers a lot of things, but what does it not cover? Staphylococcus. So we add to the piperacillin, we add tazobactam. And it adds staphylococcal coverage and expands the gram-negative coverage. Griseofulvin is always wrong. The initial therapy for staph and strep infections, oxacillin, cloxacillin, dicloxacillin, and nafacillin. Ox, clox, diclox, and naf for all staphylococcal infections. Ox, clox, diclox, and naf for all staphylococcal infections. If you're allergic to penicillin, you have a rash, use first-generation cephalosporins. Not a problem. First-generation cephalosporins. If you have anaphylaxis to cephalosporins, time to get out of the beta-lactam class. Mild infections, macrolides or clindamycin. Macrolides or clindamycin. Macrolides, erythromycin, azithromycin, clarithromycin. Methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, vancomycin, linezolid, daptomycin, tigecycline. Vancomycin, linezolid, daptomycin, tigecycline. Wow. 10 years ago there was one drug. Now there's 4. Explosion of information and knowledge. Fantastic, to the benefit of everybody. Gram-negative rods. Doxycycline. Chlamydia rickettsia. Chlamydia rickettsia Lyme. Chlamydia rickettsia Lyme. Chlamydia rickettsia Lyme. Let's look at this last thing here in terms of the names of drugs. Oseltamivir and zanamivir. Ritonavir and indinavir and sequinavir and nelfinavir and amprenavir and fosamprenavir and atazanavir. What do they cover? What do they cover? And the acyclovir and the valacyclovir and the famciclovir. IVIR. 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 What organism does it cover? AVIR. 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 What organism does it cover? O, famciclo, O, acyclo, O. When I think of the O, I think about, when I think about the O, I think about IVIR, IVIR, IVIR is influenza drugs. These are drugs for influenza. Coming at you, Sunday, 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 influenza. AIDS. These are protease inhibitors. These are protease inhibitors, protease inhibitors. These are all protease inhibitors. A. Now, what about O? What do you think about? What do you think about the O? You think about shit, I got herpes. I for influenza, A for AIDS, and oh shit, man, I got herpes. That's it. And this is good for herpes simplex virus 1 and 2, varicella zoster virus, and all those 3 herpes virus families. Don't you feel satisfied? I have now divided up every antibiotic known to humanity, and each one has its place. For each thing, a place. Amazing. How wonderful that you have all the room in your mind to contain all this information. Oh my goodness, my goodness. Afoot and light-hearted, I take to the open road. Healthy, free, the world before me. The long brown path leading me wherever I choose. Henceforth, I ask not good fortune. I myself am good fortune.